Okay, so this is my review of The Boys season finale, What I Know. This was directed by TV vet Alex Grave, who also directed my favorite episode of Game of Thrones, The Mountain and the Viper. This is the first episode he's ever directed of The Boys. This was written by Rebecca Sonnenschein, who wrote episode 2 of this season, but also wrote the finale of last season, so it makes sense they brought her on to write the finale this season. So this episode really opens up and sets up that the information's out now because of these heads exploding last episode, that the president has decided they're going to make Compound V available for first responders, military, and law enforcement. And you see how the government says the only way they can even get out of this is if they get someone like Homelander to speak against it. And it's a good setup for that first scene to happen, because by the end of this episode, we do get Homelander at a press conference being the one who resets everything that's set up here and how we're going to go into season 3, which we'll get to. So you see basically all the boys now, including Starlight, are full on in the plan of just killing these soups now. But Huey still resists, and Starlight sees this, knows Huey just saved her, knows she has to believe in him too, as he does always of her, and wants to help him and do it Huey's way. So she says, I think I know someone who can help us. And Starlight brings Huey to Maeve. Maeve is completely hostile to Huey in particular, but also not too friendly to Starlight here. She's like, haven't I done enough for you? I just saved your life. And they're asking Maeve to testify, which is a huge thing, and it is totally suicide, like Maeve says. This scene was so vital to this finale because it really makes the payoff of Maeve as a character coming around and helping them in her big entrance later on hit so much harder. And honestly, this episode, to me, solidifies Queen Maeve's story as one of the highlights of season 2, and really just consistently well done throughout, from where we see her character start the season to where she comes to the end. So we see a scene that's important here with Stan Edgar, where he is with the leader of the Church of the Collective. And this is him trying to sell Stan Edgar having Deep and A-Train being allowed back in the 7. Stan Edgar has a great line here that will get its payoff, where he says, "One has been back is redemption, 2 is weakness." This is great writing too, because it's also kind of a play on themselves, the writers of The Boys, because you've had this mystery kind of go on of like, wait, is A-Train getting full redemption arcs here? Are we going to now try to have Soul that we both are going to end up really liking them? Where is the show going with this? And you'll see by the end they actually follow through and are led by this quote from Stan Edgar. And it sets up well that the reason Stan Edgar says the Deep here is because Stormfront's still in the 7, and she would clearly not allow A-Train to be in it because of his race. But unfortunately, again, I'm really surprised how much cheesy blocking has happened in this season, and that happens here, where A-Train was just miraculously sitting there listening outside of the conference room and walks in and just shakes his head. They did this a couple episodes ago with Mother's Milk when he was listening to Huey and Butcher talk. It's so corny. I don't know why they do that. There's a better way to write him kind of appearing, I feel like. But we jump to a scene, though, where Starlight and Huey are in the car together, and Huey tells Starlight the reason he's obsessed with Billy Joel. It has to do with his mom leaving him, memories of his mother. She left him when he was 6, and the reason he's clingy is because he says, no matter how bad it gets, I don't want to be like her and abandon people. He's so loyal, Huey. And you see Starlight actually likes this a lot in him, and this is when we get this pretty much jump scare of A-Train. And they do this well because this is where you kind of get where the wheels are in motion, that we're actually going to have A-Train be the one who gets the redemption arc and not the Deep, because A-Train comes out and Huey's like, why are you bothering us? Leave us alone. I saved your life. And A-Train's like, look, we're even now. Gives him this huge file all exposing Stormfront. And it completely makes sense for his character because he's like, I want back in, so I need her gone. Screw this Nazi bitch. So it's perfect. It perfectly led up to that for him. And it actually really impressed me how they wrap up A-Train's story here and makes him more of an interesting character again. So before we go to the boys' main storyline, let's jump over to what's going on with Stormfront and Homelander here. So Stormfront says to Homelander here that Black Noir is unresponsive. They don't know if there's brain damage or not. It's hard to tell. Basically, this means he's going to be fine, which is good to hear because we definitely need more of his story. And Homelander's realizing now that they're down Black Noir. Lamplighter's gone. Starlight's basically gone from his side. And he doesn't mention Maeve here, which he completely forgot about. It helps to pay off for her appearance later because the writers don't want to keep reminding you about Maeve. So you kind of get shocked when she appears. And it does a good job setting the stage now for this really to be Homelander and Stormfront versus the boys. And you see Stormfront starts to get a little greedy here because she's talking about this Compound V getting out as this huge thing, but Homelander is actually hesitant about this. He's like, what if it gets in the wrong hands, though? And she's like, oh, don't worry about that. And you see also she wants to leave the limelight and all this paparazzi stuff. She says basically it's annoying, and you could tell Homelander doesn't like that either because that's what he's all about. So they kind of trickle in little things, and you'll see more of that with their story, how like Homelander did have some things about Stormfront he really did not like or just didn't see eye to eye on. So when they go up to see Ryan in the tower, Ashley's like babysitting him, and it's hysterical that she actually likes the movie Cats. Of course she does. And it's like, can you believe Ryan hasn't seen that? And you see, she's really balding now. They hinted at this when she was on the movie set of Dawn of the Seven. I wonder why they're making such a point of that. I wonder if they're setting up her character to be more of this evil villain in some sense, appearance-wise. Because she started as this lowly intern and has gotten more corrupt as each episode goes on. And I really like these moments they set up now with Homelander and Ryan, because Stormfront and Homelander go to Planet Vought and they get swarmed by fans. Homelander takes Ryan to his sex cabin, and Homelander's comforting Ryan about what happened, said he was overwhelmed by so many people at a time as well. He even cried, and he almost slips up to Ryan about the doctors and what really his story is about. But he says he'll teach him how to fly, he's not alone, and that he loves him. And they actually do have a bonding moment here, and Ryan even leans on him. And of course, it's a deep action figure they have outside. They have Ryan trying to zap. And you see Homelander has this line where he's like, imagine it's somebody you hate. And Ryan's like, well, I don't hate anybody. But we'll see by the end of this episode that will completely change, and he will hate someone and kill them. And you see Stormfront's kind of going over the edge here in front of Ryan and Homelander, where she's like, they are trying to destroy us because of our race. It's called white genocide. Even Homelander was like, what the fuck in this moment? Because you got to remember, Homelander's character, the reason he was on board with Stormfront's plans was for his own purposes, but he's not like full on to her belief systems. But we'll see, this is where Stormfront gets the news that Huey and Starlight have leaked this information about her being a Nazi they got from A-Train. So before we come back to Stormfront and Homelander, now we can kind of go straight through the episode from the main plot line, because everyone kind of comes together here. So Rebecca shows up to the boys. It's justified as she checked every pawn shop in Flatbush. Okay then, whatever. If that's how they have it make sense, so be it. It's not the best, but what ticks me off a little bit about seeing Rebecca with the boys in this basement, there's a couple things with the main season trailer that they showed now that were in the finale, which bothers me because when you're watching a finale, you know this is it. So if you know all the footage from the trailer and you haven't seen it yet, you know it's in this episode. They do it with a couple things. First, they do it here because if you watch the trailer, Becca is with the boys. She's a little blurred out, but you know it's her. So they gave that away even before I watched this episode, so you knew that was coming. But she tells Butcher that they took Ryan, Stormfront, and Homelander, so Butcher goes to Stan Edgar, and we get a crazy scene here because this clarifies a lot of things, this scene. It gets us back into Butcher's mindset, exactly how he is and what his intentions are about Ryan and Becca. And we also get to understand Stan Edgar's mindset about Stormfront more and what his endgame is. And they make this crazy deal because Butcher knows that Stan Edgar needs Ryan because it's what he can hold on to use against Homelander as a contingency plan. And Butcher knows he's losing Ryan here, so he's like, I'll get you Ryan back, but you promise to keep him in a better place now. And Stan thinks he means Rebecca too, but he's like, no, I'm taking Rebecca. So we get the true Butcher come out here where he's planning what he originally wanted, where it's just him and Rebecca that go away, and it's a way for him to get rid of Ryan off of his hands. Stan Edgar's even like, well, what if she comes running to my door asking for her son? And he's like, you just got to tell her that it's the only way to protect her son from Homelander. And he's like, and a mother will protect their son any way they can. And even Stan Edgar's like, that's even brutal for my standards. And you see, though, Stan Edgar even explains here with Stormfront that yeah, he knows she's racist. He knows it's crazy he even has her in the 7. But he explains, again, at the end of the day, it's always about business and her getting everyone riled up, getting Compound V to actually sell better. It raises the stock prices up and they make a lot of money. And that's all Stan Edgar cares about. So we'll see the whole team now of the boys is down to help Butcher get Ryan back. Even Becca wants to come. And you see there's a moment here where Butcher's like, you're not coming with us. It's too dangerous. I can't lose you. That scene hits so much more on second watch. Unfortunately, his first instinct was right. And you see Becca says here, I need you to promise me you'll save Ryan no matter what and get him back to me. I love they wrote Rebecca here as smart, and we know already she knows Butcher better than anybody, so she knows what he's thinking, and that he could pull something off like that where he screws Ryan over. And what they did really well here was then Butcher, after swearing on his brother's life, you see he's concerned, and then he looks at the phone that he knows is going to track Vought to Ryan, and he's having his doubts right here. Oh my god, and some of the little humor they sneak in the show is always great, especially here because we cut to Homelander sitting with Ryan watching TV as the news breaks about Stormfront, and he's just drinking a glass of milk with him. I thought that was so funny. But you see the boys had this loud noise playing to distract Homelander away from Ryan, and you see this is when Butcher and Becca run into this cabin to rescue Ryan, and when she's hugging Ryan, now you see Butcher is going the other way. You see him staring at her, and he's changed his mind at this moment. So Butcher does have somewhat of a soul, and you see he flips the plan, and he tells Mother's Milk, like, no, you need to take Becca and Ryan out of here. Tells Becca he was gonna sell them out, which shocked me that he opened up about this. And he's like, I was gonna sell you out, and I might do it again. You can't have a cunt like me around that kid. Great line. And very sad. But it's interesting to see Butcher and his self-awareness, and actually the one person who gets him to do what's best is really Becca. And Becca shows the best parts of Butcher. And what's huge here is Homelander now shows up back to the cabin, sees Ryan's gone, and he says to Vaught's men, did I hear you say Butcher? Which is huge because at the end of this episode, we see him with Vought again, but they don't touch into that confrontation. That's definitely going to happen in season 3 because Homelander now knows that Stan Edgar was willing to capture his son away from him again. And I love he just zaps that guy in half and ends up just killing all of them. But just as Mother's Milk, Becca, and Ryan are about to get out, Stormfront shows up. Again, ruined by the trailer for me. I don't know if this happened for anyone else, but that season trailer showed so many clips from this episode. And that burns you again because it's the finale. So you know it's in this. So I knew right away Stormfront was coming there. And because in the trailer, they show her lifting that car on that runway. This is just a personal gripe of mine. I'm not holding it against the show. I'm holding it against how they're deciding what to put in the trailer. I really love Aya Cash in this sequence when she comes down super pissed. And she was the one giving the speech to Starlight early in the season about not having a mask. But it's so ironic because Stormfront always does have a mask on. And here you see that full evil person just showing herself. The way she says the line, there you are, you slippery little bitch. She does it so good because if you've ever been around a cat fight, this kind of anger you're going to hear come out. And you felt it from Aya Cash. I thought it was great. And we get a lot of payoffs that were set up in this episode and throughout the season, but in particular here with Kimiko, they do an extreme close-up of her smirking. It's the moment she's thinking about what Frenchie said to her in this episode that, don't worry about freezing up, you're going to know what to do. It gave her hope. It's an awesome moment. And then she starts giggling, which was great. And Frenchie tells Stormfront what Kimiko was saying, and it was, she's going to stick her boot up your Nazi kitty. That was so funny, and it was perfect Frenchie said that. And now my favorite part of the episode was this fight scene with Stormfront. Holy crap. They shot this perfectly, and they wrote this perfectly, because anytime you do a fight sequence, it's kind of a mini story you're writing. And with directing, to get all the reaction shots perfectly, to set up all the emotion with the writing and the directing here, everything pays off and everything hits. First, it's huge that they had Starlight and Kimiko being the first ones to go for Stormfront because it's setting up in this scene the huge payoff of Girls Get It Done. It's already showing you the guys are going to be on the sidelines for this. And they do such a good job at making you think all hope is lost here, because when she blows up Frenchie's RPGs he had ready for her, you're like, shit. And then they literally have her snap Kimiko's neck, shoot Starlight down, and right at that moment, Maeve comes in with one of the most iconic entrances I can remember in anything. And the rock music kicks in. This just hit on so many levels. It gives you goosebumps or nerd bumps, whatever you want to call them. And we finally get to see Maeve's hand-to-hand combat in full swing. I love she got that nasty elbow in too. That was great. Seriously, Wonder Woman who? And having, with the music pumping up, Maeve's in, and then Kimiko snaps her neck back, and Starlight gets back up. This really is awesome, because they had this Girls Get It Done set up from the beginning in this crazy press tour, and actually it working here for us in a serious way, which was awesome. And just to really get to see them just beating the crap out of this Nazi Stormfront. And it was so smart. They relied heavily on the kicking and the punching and the hand-to-hand combat, because it always just hits harder. You feel it. You want to feel like you're punching Stormfront there. So it was Really, really well done. It was awesome. But this leads to Stormfront leaving this scene now, really torn up, now going to where Ryan and Butcher are, and Becca. So Becca stabs her in the eye, which was crazy and gruesome, and Stormfront's about to kill Ryan. And what really takes the impact down from this scene is anyone with a brain watching this knows Ryan was going to eventually zap her here. But can you imagine the impact if he zapped her and we hadn't seen that earlier in this season, that he used his powers in front of Homelander in one of the earlier episodes? If they had just not shown him actually use the lasers, for this moment to be the first time would have been huge and more shocking. Yes, you can assume he was going to have powers, obviously. Even in the end of season 1 finale, his eyes go a little red. But we didn't necessarily have to see him actually use his powers till this moment. But for some reason, they decided, you know what? Let's have him use it in that episode with Homelander when he pushes him off the roof. That pisses me off a lot because it really wasn't necessary at the end of the day. Homelander always had an inkling he had powers. This could have been the big moment that everyone kind of really confirms it. And it would have shocked the audience a little more. And you see when he zaps Stormfront here, she ends up looking like Anakin Skywalker at the end of Revenge of the Sith. She's speaking in German. If anyone could translate that, I'm really interested to know what she was saying. But the big thing here is he ends up killing his mom in the process, who he's trying to protect. This will clearly probably be the root of him becoming more like Homelander as he gets older. It's a huge traumatic thing, and blaming yourself and killing your mother. And that's of course why when Becca's dying, says to Butcher, make sure he knows it's not his fault. Can we really trust Butcher though with that responsibility? And when Becca's dying here and she's like, you promised me you keep him safe. Great acting by Becca here, but Karl Urban, I mean, this is really sealing him as definitely deserving of at least an Emmy consideration for this season. He sucks the tears out of you here. Like, they're gonna come if you're human watching this. He does such a good job, and from transitioning to being that broken in an instant and then looking at Ryan, and I thought he was gonna kill him here. That was crazy. Was so good, and that goes to how good the directing also is in this episode. Again, with the pacing and everything reacting to each other and having just big emotional beats. But what's crazy is when you realize when Homelander comes down here, he's in all the blood and he shows up. Like I've said before, Butcher and Homelander are always a reflection of each other, and they show that in so many ways. But in here, you're just seeing now both of them literally lost in the woods and symbolically lost in the woods, and they both lost the loves of their lives in Stormfront and Becca. Both of them were killed by the same child, who is one son and one stepson. Just crazy connection between the two of them, and just hits and works really well. And obviously this has already been said so much, and I totally agree with this too, that Antony Starr, he's due from season 1 getting an Emmy nomination. He definitely deserves one here as well for this season. I don't know if you could have cast Homelander any better than Antony Starr. But Homelander showing up actually gives Butch time to come to his senses and realize he may not like this kid, but you know what? He promised for Becca, who he loves, that he'll protect him. So he cools off a bit. So you see Maeve shows up again, and this time she's got the blackmail that she finally shows to Homelander. I think Maeve, we could say, has won the season. Probably the best story arc and the most badass moments now. And she's like, let them go, leave me and Elaine alone, and stop hunting Starlight. So a lot of this does a good job at resetting now and setting up for season 3 to kind of get off some of the threats we're used to. And he's like, if you release that, I will destroy you and everyone you love. And she's like, good. People see the monster you are and no one will love you ever again. Then they kind of put in the sounds that you hear going on in his head about fans cheering his name, and he never wants to lose that, so that makes sense. So I am conflicted on one thing with this scene, and I'm just not so sure how I feel about it still, even though I've sat on and thought about it a lot. But Homelander obviously could have just zapped Maeve in half there and took her phone and flew away. So in my head, I have to justify it that he wouldn't do that by thinking he loves or cares about Maeve enough that he wouldn't kill her. And I'm not so sure I believe that. So it leaves me a little bit scratching my head. I'm interested in what you guys think about that specific moment, and if it's plausible, and do you buy that Homelander wouldn't just kill her right there? So we'll see now, though, that Homelander backs off, and we go to this press conference, and of course Stan Edgar's blaming Stormfront. The theme of this show is that if anyone dies, they're going to have the whole load thrown onto them. They're the scapegoat. They did this with Stillwell, now they're doing it with Stormfront. And it reverses everything because Now they're pulling back on having Compound V released because it looks bad because they said Stormfront caused the heads exploding in the courtroom. This screws Edgar money-wise and his plan to make a lot of money off of Compound V. But then you wonder watching this, I'm happy they're resetting things, so I think they made things more exciting story-wise for season 3. But watching now Homelander apologize to Starlight, apologize to Maeve, tie all these conflicts we had so much setup this season getting to reveals about Stormfront and her endgame, and then when it finally starts her play, it resolves. So did it resolve too quickly on the opposite end of something that did a lot of setup this season? I definitely feel that, and I think that hurts the season as a whole. Personally, I thought that the story direction they were going with Stormfront, maybe making this too big and having it this like world war about race, might have been a trap to go towards, so I'm happy they're moving on from it. I don't think it would have been the most interesting story for season 3, but it's an odd writing choice in how this season unfolds, and it just feels weird how quickly everything just closed up here, and that we set up all this conflict with Stormfront and Homelander team together, and it's like, okay, it's over, that's it, 2 episodes done. So that was strange. I love though they had Starlight in her old outfit here and her old haircuts. That was cool, so kind of reaffirmed that's coming back. And I love the extreme close-up here during the press conference of Homelander, how crazy he's going, and then leading to him literally jerking off on top of a building, saying I can do whatever I want, just full psycho mode. And now what's interesting with A-Train and Deep here, we see with the leader of the collective, and A-Train's back in the 7. He's allowed in, he gets the win, and he also gets the redemption arc, where Deep doesn't make it. And I love they have Deep's line here where he's like, so that means I'm back in too, right? I'm against Nazis. And you see the leader says 1 hero is redemption, 2 is weakness. So I think that's also the show, like I said, making a play on its own story here with Deep and A-Train and how many redemption arcs they're going to do, and that maybe they're misguiding us on purpose with Deep, and that we've gotten hints that he's still difficult. He still will throw anyone under the bus to move up. And how much has he really grown? So this might revert, because he's so angry here, to him actually getting worse as a person. We'll see. Should be interesting. But I hope it helps this story, because I do feel like it's really dragged out and fallen flat. So Starlight's story kind of wraps up here, where she's wearing the mother's necklace she got of the cross, and that she's like, well, there's got to be a higher power, because if Billy Butcher can do the right thing, then anyone can. And Huey's like, are you still going to be in that tower? And she's like, yeah, because you're still part of the problem if you let assholes steer. So I like this for Starlight's character. It gives a good justification why she would stay even in the 7. And her saying to Huey, someone taught me something about hanging in there. So it's good kind of character growth for Starlight from where we saw her at the beginning of the season. And that goes to Huey too. I really like what they do with Huey here, because he's having this revelation like, I'm not going to be as clingy anymore. You think he's talking about Starlight, but he's really talking about towards Butcher and depending on Butcher and being his own man. And it really sets up where his storyline is going for season 3, which we'll get to. And you see Butch now with Ryan gives him St. Christopher medal that Becca gave him to protect him. Now he's giving it to Ryan, and it is that part of him that wants to make sure Ryan's okay, showing him that and honoring Becca. But thank God he's giving him over to Mallory, because that would have been a nightmare trap if they had Ryan hanging out with the boys. It's better they have a child character kind of in the distance. Like I've said all season, I don't like the lines they write for Mallory. I'm not a huge fan of the actress either, and in particular here, she's like, Vought's gonna want him back. Think he will turn into his father. All right, stop holding our hands with these lines. Like, thank you for telling us Vaught's gonna want him back. I think we could have figured that out. And yes, we've been hinted about him turning into his father all season long. We don't need this reaffirmed so clearly for us. It's too much. And she's like, all the charges are dropped on the boys. They're free again, even though they've seemed pretty free this whole season. That complaint I had where Butcher and Starlight just were able to go out to a hospital with Huey when they're all wanted. That was just ridiculous. They've really stretched that. But this is where things get really interesting, setting up for season 3, where we learn that the White House is opening an Office of Soup Affairs, and Congresswoman Victoria Newman is the head of it. It's a team that can keep tabs on the Soup's oversight, so it's obviously more government-controlled version of the boys. And of course, someone who's a renegade like Butcher is probably not going to be interested in that, as she offers him for him to join it. But what's crazy about all this is that we see the man who runs the Church of the Collective, and he says he's got all this dirt on Soups and that it will screw Stan Edgar. And he basically wants a tax break from Victoria Newman, who he's on the phone with, telling this. She hears this, then looks at him, and his head explodes. So the huge twist, it was Victoria Newman behind all these exploding heads. Congresswoman. And remember, she was in the courtroom when all the heads were exploding, and it was interesting why hers didn't. That was a big hint. If she wasn't involved, why wouldn't have they blown her head off? She was a big threat to Vought. So she's clearly part of Stan Edgar's game here. It makes sense that a big business like Vought would have some people they can trust in government. So I loved this twist, and it's crazy that she's also a soup herself. And I guess her superpower is blowing up these heads, because we see her eyes move looking at him after his head blows up. And then it makes complete sense how they set up Huey now, because he wants to be his own man. He wants to do things the right way. So of course he wants to go somewhere that's taking care of soups, which he loves to do, but in the right way, as he says, not covering in as many guts. He's saying this to the queen of covering people in guts and exploding heads, Victoria herself, which was just great. And he even says, I really didn't fit in with those guys. It's time for me to stand on my own 2 feet. I love this. It's really interesting for Huey now. As a character I'm not crazy about, this got me really excited for his story in season 3. So a lot of my complaints this episode were results of how they're affecting the season as a whole and connecting to just my main issues of this season. But as a finale, I'm giving this episode a 9.8. I thought it was excellent. Second best one to episode 3, but very close. One of the best episodes of The Boys ever. It ended on a really high note for me, and it really paid off well, because like I said, I was worried that episode 7 was a lot of setup, but hopefully that meant we were going to get a really crazy finale, and we did. And they wrapped it up well to keep you excited for season 3. And I was on the fence, depending on the finale, what would be the better season in my eyes, season 1 or season 2. I gave season 1 in my season 1 review of The Boys about an 8.8 or 8.9. This finale, I think, took season 2 a little bit over season 1 for me. It's close, though. They both have, obviously, their pros and cons, but this one I'm going to give a 9.1. And you might say season 2 is slower, but keep in mind, watching week to week is going to change your perception of that. I'm not someone who likes to binge anything. I do like taking in stuff and taking my time with it, and I had watched Boys season 1 myself week to week in a sense, and it was also very slow in parts, and I think if people had watched that week to week, you wouldn't think it was as good in comparison to season 2. I think this show's always had slow parts, but I think season 2 did a little better with the characters and more interesting storylines going on, but it did suffer a little more weight of a lot of mouths to feed, like I've said constantly, and a lot more suspending of your disbelief compared to season 1. Let me know down below what you thought of this finale. Also, let me know what you thought of the season as a whole. Did you like it better or worse than season 1 or 2? I'd love to hear all your guys' thoughts on this. Give me any theories you got as well, but no comic spoilers. I will delete your comment immediately. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel. I do a bunch of reviews of shows and movies. I'm currently reviewing Raised by Wolves as well. I will be reviewing Haunting of Bly Manor and The Undoing. And I also do celebrity interviews. I interviewed Karen Fukuhara of The Boys, so you want to check that out as well. And if you really like what I do, I can't tell you how much it would mean to me if you could sign up for a monthly donation of $2 through PayPal. There's a link in my description. It would help me so much. If I can raise enough money, I'll be able to do this full time and get you guys more videos for you to enjoy. And please make sure to follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.